website, so it will be recorded as of now. So going over these few miscellaneous, this is going to be our outline for today. We're going to learn how to launch TOPSpro Enterprise, identify various menus, submenus, overview some filters and some sorting buttons, also create student records, create classes, and if time permits, we may be able to generate a few reports. Now, this session is appropriate for administrators, program coordinators, and database managers. So anybody who is assisting on managing your data should be, can attend this training. Now, a few miscellaneous, please mute your audio if you're using the computer audio, or if you're using your phone, you can also dial *6 if you can please mute it. That should be fine. It's just to reduce the background noise, but if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourselves and interject with your questions. And you may also enter them in the chat pod. We have our colleagues Tyler Fu and Laurel Duro who are going to be assisting with co-training and also responding any questions that I am probably not able to see during the presentation, but you can also raise up your voice and tell us about it. I already put in the chat box to please enter your name and your email address so we can have a registration of yourselves and count you as participants for today. We have a couple of links here for documentation for this training. You can find it on our website. I'm going to copy this link and post it on our chat pod as well. And also, we're going to be using the Rolling Hills database for training purposes. So here is also where you can find information on how to access. Oh, that's a little bit too convoluted here. So how to access the Rolling Hills database, you will be able to find it in this link. Alrighty. So if anybody has any questions before we start, please feel free to raise up your voice or to enter it into the chat box. All right, folks. So we're going to start by going over to our website, which is CASAS.org. From our website here, we have a wealth of documentation, especially if you are using TOPSpro Enterprise and learning how to use it for the first time, or we have a wealth of documentation under training and support. Training and support leads us to several other links on the bottom left of the big pictures on the top. So you will see some other links like ETAS Online Help, TOPSpro Enterprise Help, online training, and several other options. So the one that I am directing you to today for this workshop, it's the TOPSpro Enterprise Help. And you can also find many documentation for TOPSpro Enterprise as well in the ETAS Online Help. So make sure to check out both links when you have a chance. So right now I clicked in the TOPSpro Enterprise Help documentation, where you can find several PDF downloadable files and also some other links towards the left-hand side, which includes a wealth of documentation into each of these selections. So in the class, student, and teacher information, I'm going to go ahead and click on this because this involves some of the topics that we're going to touch on today in regards to class information, how to create a class, how to add student records, how to create all that type of information. And if we have a chance at the end, we will be able to generate reports. All right, folks, so let me close this window here and bring this over here. Okay, so now for accessing TOPSpro Enterprise online, I know that everybody must be working from home or having a little different setup than what you are normally used to in your office. So you can also access TOPSpro Enterprise from your home. but you have to install it in your computer. You will need a Windows 10 operation OS operation, so you can install TOPSpro Enterprise. Okay, so this is one of the requirements. So if you have a Windows 10 operating system, and you should be able to install TOPSpro Enterprise. Our website that we're going to be using today is the Rolling Hills database. So I already posted this link to our chat pod, so you can know how to access the Rolling Hills database. This is the document that will give you guidance step by step on how to go to the website. So you can either go to this document and click on this link, the eTest Online help, or etestonline.org/Rolling Hills database. So this is one of the websites or one of the servers that we have available. We have several servers. We have the global server. We have the California server, specifically for California agencies. We have another server for Washington, and another one for Miami-Dade County Public Schools. So our server doesn't get collapse or doesn't. So we have distributed specifically for each of the different states, or in this case, California has its very own server. So I am going to type it in here, https://ca.etestsonline.org.
Tennessee.
Once we click on that, it automatically redirects you to the HTML5 version, and that way you'll be able to have the the California website, the California eTest Online website. As you can see, the URLs can be different. So CA is pertaining to California agencies.
But I'm on a meeting.
Right now, we're going to be using the eTest Online, the Rolling Hills database. And you may be thinking, why does this have to do with eTest Online if I'm just using TOPSpro Enterprise? Well, this is a way of getting you TOPSpro Enterprise. So you got to go to this website, either this one, the Rolling Hills, or the California, and then click on this Install TE Client button on your top left corner. This is what it's going to lead us to install TOPSpro Enterprise. So I'm going to go ahead and click on it. As you can see, this makes a download to install. And you can go anytime to this website and download a fresh copy of TOPSpro Enterprise. What this is doing right now, as you can see, my mouse is circling. This is creating a shortcut on my desktop. So you can have that icon for you. If you always want to go to refer to your desktop icon, you can definitely do that. Okay, so we're going to be monitoring our chat pod as best as we can so we can address those questions. Thank you. So now that this is done, I am going to go to my desktop to look for that icon. And since I have another monitor next to me, this was created. So I'll just double click on your icon, on the TOPSpro Enterprise icon, so I can open up the program. Now what this is going to do is bring it over here, and I always like to right click on my TE icon at the bottom of your taskbar so you can pin it to your taskbar. That way it always remains in here. It looks like it opened a couple of TOPSpro Enterprise instances. So I'm going to go ahead and close one. And when you right click, you have the option to pin it or unpin it. In this case, I already have it pinned, but you can unpin it from your taskbar whenever you want. And this is, once you pin it, it will remain there.
And is there
all right, so I'm going to go ahead and open up the Rolling Hills database.
Okay.
Okay. Can everybody hear me just fine? Okay, it looks like.
Can you ask people to mute their backgrounds?
9790.
I can definitely mute
Thank
everyone.
you.
So hold on one second.
1202. And do you have an email for him?
Thank you. All right, it sounds like That's better. Okay. So continuing on with our TOPSpro Enterprise login, we're going to use the document that I told you before that contains the information about logging in to the Rolling Hills database. So I usually go to the CASAS.org website, and you can just type Rolling Hills in the chat, in the search box. That way, once you type in Rolling Hills, click on that. It gives you this document that I was showing before, and I already entered the URL on the chat pod. Well, this contains information about every single user account. We have 50 generic user accounts for administrators, 50 for coordinators, 50 for proctors, and 50 for teachers. And here it tells you what are the login credentials you can use for every individual user account. So you can use any account for administrators, any number from 1 through 50. And that way you can enter the Rolling Hills database as an administrator. In this case, this is the account that we're going to use today because this is specifically for administrators or data managers. So you can also show how to enter as teachers and see what level of access those accounts have. Each account has a different level of access. In this case, I'm going to use administrator 12 at rhas.org. Of course, I was selecting the Rolling Hills server, and 4908 should be the proper state agency site ID number. And the password is admin, all lowercase. And then I enter or click on the connect green button so you can connect properly to the server. While this connects us, we're just going to leave a few seconds here for the system to connect us. And that way we will be entering into the system, TOPSpro Enterprise. And how we're going to know, well, it's a white empty screen. And you'll see the menus on your top left corner and the general information about build and version on your top right, as well as a username and just general settings for your screen. So on the top left corner, if you hover your mouse over this TE icon, you'll be watching over what you are connected to. Right now, you're connected to the Rolling Hills simulation server, and it provides you with the URL, as well as it gives you your agency ID number and also, again, the user ID that you are connecting with. So if you don't happen to remember your agency ID, just quickly hover over the TE icon on your top left, and you should be able to verify the agency ID number and the username. So if we click now on, instead of hovering, if we click on the TOPSpro Enterprise, it's like your file menu on your top left always. You just click on it and then it brings up a menu. So it brings up several submenus. If you continue hovering around, you're going to see that all the menus have different menus inside, as well as some other submenus. The ones that have a little arrow towards the right-hand side is the one that has other submenus. Not all of them do, but some of them do. So if you just hover around them, they will show up and show you all the information that you can open up. Okay. All right. So the TOPSpro Enterprise general information is to disconnect, to lock your computer if you're going to walk away for a moment or half an hour, you're going to go into a meeting and you don't want anybody to be looking into your TOPSpro Enterprise database, you can definitely lock it. So you keep your data secured, or you can also disconnect to it. You have the options to change a password or associate account or other options. So I'm going to look into the other options, and this is going to bring us this other menu with several windows here to look into. So it tells you the default agency that you're connected to, and then this default site, if you have one. If you are restricted to a specific site, like you have to sign in as 4908/ /01 or /something, then your account must be set up at the site level. So you can keep that as is. There's really nothing to be changing in here except for the inactive timeout interval, since I usually, when I get into the office, I usually work in TOPSpro Enterprise a whole day. So your inactive timeout interval usually set to maybe 30 minutes as a default. And every 30 minutes, if you're inactive in TOPSpro Enterprise, it will inactivate your username. So it'll automatically lock you. So if you want the system not to do that, you can inactivate it for a longer period of time. I do the 999, which is a max amount of minutes allowed. So you can do that as well if that's your computer and it's safe for you to do that. Okay. And the on-start window, we will see this other settings here. The one that I am interested on always is this warning, the WTU's warning. So some of you may see or notice a little warning once you log into TOPSpro Enterprise. It tells you, hey, you have less than 500, or you have this amount of units, which is less than 500. Please, I don't know, it gives you a little warning. So if you don't want that warning to be showing every time that you log in, because probably your web test units consumption is not that big or at the moment, you can disable this and make it as low as 50. So the WTUs, I see a question here from Karen. Thank you, Karen. That's a really good question. WTUs equals or means web test units, which are provided if you use TOPSpro Enterprise along with eTests Online. So these are the units for you to use eTests Online and test your students in the eTests Online system. Thank you. I see Laurel also answered on the chat pod. So that means web test units, which are good for eTest Online. eTest Online and TOPSpro Enterprise are connected. They share the same database, but there's two phases or two areas where you can connect, which is eTest Online, which is the testing side of the application, and then there's TOPSpro Enterprise, which is the data reporting and data managing side of the application. So these two are directly connected, and the warning is about your web test units orders or consumption, only if you use eTest Online. If you don't have eTest Online, that's fine. You don't need to worry about this. And now the edit view, I usually change it to unchanged. It's really up to you, to your preference. When you say proper, it won't allow you to capitalize any kind of words that you want all the word to be capitalized, like RHAS for Rolling Hills Adult School. I would like to capitalize that for some reason in any of the menus. If I do the proper, it won't allow me to do that unless I do unchanged. If I want to do a mix of capital and lowercase, it's really up to you. You can always keep it to the defaults. It's fine. And there's going to be several other windows in here, which I always recommend to keep it to the defaults. For listers, for reports, for imports, this is an important one here. If you are an agency that uses an attendance system, such as ASAP or Schoolhouse or any other attendance system, and you do import records or data from that system, and you do hours of attendance as well, you can do this third party. If you use accumulated attendance hours, you can always check it here in this area and save it for your records. Otherwise, it's not a big deal for you to change it. And now exports, this is also kept to the defaults. And as you can see, there's other windows in here which is fine. The way that they are programmed, they should be perfectly fine for you to work in TOPSpro Enterprise. Now I'm going to go ahead and click OK to close that window. And we're going to start describing all of the menus that you see on the top. The dashboard and shortcuts are not always allowed by default. If you log into the Rolling Hills database, you will. You can always look into different shortcuts that you can set up as your own schema. If you like to go into different reports, you can set up your own schema in here by adding to any of the listers or anything that you would like to see. This is a little bit more advanced option in here. Once you are used to opening up different listers and different reports in TOPSpro Enterprise, you will be able to set up any of the shortcuts that you'd like to set up for your own convenience, and this is going to be really fast for you to access anything. Okay, so I'm going to close it right now and go back to the view button. This view button as well is going to, or menu, is going to allow us to change different font size for small, normal, medium to large. By default is in the normal size. You can change it to medium or large. This really depends much on the size of your screen and of course your needs for looking at a larger or smaller font. Okay. Right now, I'm just going to leave it to normal, and we're going to come back to this and troubleshoot it so you can see the difference. Or let me just click on medium right now. As you can see, the menu changes on the top, and if I do the large, this will make it bigger, obviously. And then depending on my monitor size, this is going to probably be looking a little crumpled up here on the top. So I'm going to change it back to normal, and you also see the small size, which is for you, as small as you have it, you view more information or more things are able to be showing on your picture or on your screen. So the normal size, I'm going to keep it that for now. Now, the organization menu pertains to records about your agency and your staff, and your organizational foundation information will be in the organization menu. You will not, this is only for your organization purposes, not for students or any other records, but for your organization, like your agencies, sites, classes. As you can see, there are some submenus, but where I always like to direct our new users is to go to the organization agencies menu. That way, you will see all these other options embedded in the organization navigator. And let me double click on this agencies option so you can see. We'll open up our agency information, and then you will be able to see what I'm talking about. So once you open up the agency's record, you will see your agency's information here with the ID number, agency name, and there's different column headers in here with information about it. There is a scroller bar at the bottom area of your screen, so you can use it to scroll over to the right-hand side. There are some other buttons across the top area. As you can see, the menu never moves away from here. The menu on the top left will always be docked in there. And there are many more buttons in here, as well as these pages and more button towards the right hand side, which hides more buttons that aren't able to display here on the top area because of my screen size. If I were to reduce this screen size, I may have been able to fit more, like the edit schema button, for instance. Under the more button is not there anymore, but it is displayed on the top. So please observe this area here as I move along to changing the different font sizes. As you can see, if I change it to large, I'm just able to see, or medium, I'm just able to see the refresh button. But under the more button, we'll be hiding the other more buttons depending again on your screen size. Okay, so I'm going to turn back to normal. And using the scroller bar, I'm going to look into the agency's information. Now, these columns are somewhat similar to an Excel spreadsheet. So you can make these smaller, narrow, or larger, wider if you'd like. It depends on, what your preferences are for you to see always when you look at this lister. This is what we call a lister. If you go to organization agencies, that will become a lister, or sites or classes. So once you are in this organization menu, you can set it up as the way you want it. Like in this case, I would like to reduce the space so I can see everything in here and not be able to see the scroller bar at the bottom area. So what I'm going to do, if I always want to keep this setting and I always want to see this as is, I can save my preferences by going to, in this case, in the More button, by going to the Edit Schema button. Once I click on the Edit Schema button, you will find this default setting by default, of course. You can either change the name if you'd like, or you can leave it to the default settings. If that's the only one that you're going to keep, you can always click on the Save button. And that way it will be saved as is. If I would like to populate other information about my agency, I can always right click on this gray area and show any other possible information about my agency, like perhaps funding sources. I can also add that as funding sources and expand that as a little bit more so I can see everything in this screen. And if I always want to keep that funding sources presented here in this lister, I would click on More, Edit Schema again, and Save. Same information. So once I have set up my lister like that, I will double click on my agency's name to open up the record. Opening up the information about my agency will immediately put a navigator on the left-hand side with multiple other items, as you can see. And you can also use these scroller bars to navigate up and down. But this contains our agency's main information page. This will give us the agency ID number, our license, agency's name, and other important information like funding sources, current program year. This is a button that you have available at your agency. You just got to be mindful that changing this current program year will change it to everybody that is using TOPSpro Enterprise along your agency with your users, all the users that have TE. If you happen to change this current program year, you should be able to change it for everybody. So you just got to be mindful, especially when there are people testing on eTest online. If you have eTest, this will change also the program year, which is not a good idea to change it unless you are doing some special importing or running special reports in previous program years. Okay, so please don't change it unless you have a good reason for doing it and you have alerted everybody of changing the program year so they will know. So usually the program year, the default program year is set to the current. So right now we're in the 1920 program year. We have agency contact information, which primarily is set up to the data manager's user account in here, or the primary contact for TOPSpro Enterprise and CASAS itself. If you have any questions or any contact changes that you would like to do, is you cannot edit it right here right away, but we do have to document this information by sending us an email. You can send us an email to golive@casas.org to change the primary contact or the agency's main point of contact. Or you can also go to our website. Let me show you my screen here. Everybody looking at the eTest online screen? I'm sorry, the CASAS.org. Okay, perfect. So the CASAS.org website, you have a way of also changing under training and support. You can go to the TOPSpro Enterprise Help And in this TOPSpro Enterprise Help documentation page, you have this little link that says TE account change request. You can also go into this link and set up a change request. However, you will need to be logged in to the CASAS.org website so you can make this change and enter the information that you want to change in TE. Okay, so this is still loading, but once you have this page, like I said, it's going to ask you to log in. So if you're not properly logged in, it's going to request for your email and password. And then you can look into the questionnaire that you need to fill out. And this is something really simple and easy to fill in. It's about 4 little pages here with basic information about contact information, and the DM stands for data manager. So you can enter all that information and submit it. Okay, so this is another way of changing contact information for TOPSpro Enterprise and CASAS itself. Okay, back to our TOPSpro Enterprise. We have gone over the main point of contact, and if you are part of the California Adult Education Program into a consortium, you can also see that information below. None of this information is editable. Nobody can edit this, but you'll have to send us a request by the ways that I was telling you. The email again is golive@casas.org, or go to our website for that TOPSpro Enterprise change request. Let me enter into the chat pod, go live at casas.org, which is the email address that you need to send those requests to. All right, folks, with all that said now, as you can see, this navigator on the left-hand side has multiple resources and other areas for you to look into. So from the navigator on the left, I'm going to click on the Sites menu. The Sites menu, once I click on the Sites option, is of course going to provide me with a list of sites. So if you only have one site, you will only see one listed in here, or as many as you have from any possible amount of sites, you should see them displayed in this other menu. Again, these are resizable if you'd like, however you would like to see. Any size of the columns, you can resize them, and you can also save this schema as well by clicking on the More button and Edit Schema. So now, once you go into one of the sites, I am going to double click on one of these sites. Let's click on the North Campus, Site 01. So for Site 01, folks, once you double click on it, as you can see, it's going to open up on a different window, on a different tab. So it keeps adding up on the top area. And that way I will be able to display all my site information about the North Campus. And again, you will always see this little navigator on your left-hand side with multiple options. The navigator is always has this little pin button. It's always pinned by default, but if you would like to display a larger view, you can always unpin it. So that way it'll give us a better view. And you can always hover back into it and look up on the navigator. So once in this site, we will have some different buttons on the top area as well. We have this little count or lister where it gives us a total number of sites that we have. And you can always use these little arrows to navigate through the next available record. In this case, we are looking at the sites. If I click on this next arrow, I should be able to go to the second or next campus or next site that we have available, as well as navigating towards the next one. Or if you click on the last, it's going to take you straight over to the last site available. Some of these links or some of these buttons are also displayed to provide more information or also the more button should give us more information about the site. What I always like to point our folks to is to this more button in the info. The info button displays the information about the site itself. When it got created originally, the first version, when it got created, when was secondly edited, and the third time that the site got edited. As you can see, this goes back to, well, this date is a little bit different because we're using the Rolling Hills database, and some of these and a lot of all this information in the top in the Rolling Hills database is fictional. So this date is also fictional. It shouldn't display 2020, but this is just for training purposes. It should have a past date recorded in here. All right, so you can always look into the more button for any kind of records, including a student record, a test record. You can always look up at the more button and the info. The info, again, will provide you more information on how that record got created into the database. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and hover my mouse back into the navigator and pin this back. Pin it back so I can show you the different submenus that there are in the navigator. We have subsites, which as you can see on the right hand side, it doesn't display anything. That means that we don't have any subsites under the site. The TOPSpro Enterprise creates this parent-child relationship where the bigger umbrella is the Rolling Hills Adult School. And under that big umbrella, we have several sites which were in this second window here. So these are the sub-sites. So the position or count is going to tell you the total amount of sites that we have available. All right. So going back to my North Campus, double clicking on it, it will give me a list of, again, back to the navigator. I clicked on class definitions and it gives me a count of class definitions. In this case, I have 1,390 classes in the site 01, which is in North Campus. And then we click on class instances and we should be able to see the amount of class instances in here. All right, so can anybody tell me how many class instances we have? In the North Campus. Anybody? Okay, $12.99. Karen, Irma, perfect. Thank you so much. So yeah, you like I said, you are well observing this position count or counter, as I call it. This will give you the total amount of classes without having to be counting them one by one. And now you can also double click on any of the classes that we see here and it will open up on a different tab. Okay, it opens up on a different tab on your right hand side. So as you can see, you don't really lose what you were looking at before, but it opens up on another window. And then you can see the exact information about this specific class instance. And then it also provides you with this little navigator on your left-hand side so you can see further information about the class instance. Like it opens up by default on the edit/view menu. And then you can see any attendance or any class enrollments. You can see class records and tests as well. And that will open up all or will list all our records that are associated with that class. I see a question from Karen. Oh, and Laurel is already taken care of that. So I'm just going to read it out loud. How do definitions and instances differ from each other? Well, like Laurel says, name of the class, the definitions hold like the name of the class and who's teaching the class instances, and which equals to the time period that the class will be used. And the class instance is what it gives you more detailed information, like when it's the validity period, what is the instructional program for the for the class instance like it's named in here. If I click this little edit button that looks like a pencil, I will be able to show the instructional programs. Like this class, for instance, has other program assigned as instructional. If you have an ESL class, you can mark it as ESL. If it's a high school diploma, it really depends on what the program is. You can see the class start and end date. And you can also add special programs if needed, like EL Civics or Integrated Education and Training if it's a 243 class, or any other type of special programs. There's transition focuses as well as focus area. For those of you who have EL Civics classes, if you click this little drop down arrow, you should be able to see all your funding sources. And I'm going to come back to and explain how to fill out the funding sources information page. So the class instance is like a shell, like the shell for, I'm sorry, the class definition is like the shell, and where you have to create it in order to create a class instance. So you cannot have a class instance without a class definition. The definition is where you define the class ID, the class name, and other important information about it. But in the instance is where you furtherly refine more information like instructional programs, special programs. And I'm gonna turn over to Tyler Fu in just a second so he can show you how to create a new class. We're gonna go over the rest of the menus as well a little bit further later on, but I would like to show you this Pages button, including our general display here. If you happen to want to dissect your view in two, you can always come to the Pages button and click this new vertical page group, which I love because sometimes I find myself comparing one class to another and it's kind of hard because I only have one screen. Well, as you can see, this dissected or cut my screen in half, and everything was displayed towards the main screen, which is the left-hand side. But you see those little two arrows like scrolling towards the right and scrolling towards the left. If I happen to click on this tab and drag it over to the black area here on the top, then I am able to see two different classes or two different screens. I can unpin my navigator, so that gives me a better view of the classes. I can also look into another class and change it towards the other view. Okay, so this is a fun tool to always use under the Pages button. You can also do a new horizontal page group, which will furtherly cut in half your second screen. And if you want to use another class and compare both of the instructional programs per se, I would go to Organization, Classes, Instances, and this gives me a different menu. This different menu, it's pertaining to the Rolling Hills database, which is a general menu. I'm gonna look into the More button, and this is the total amount of classes that we have for all the sites together, Now, if I just want to see the classes from site number 1, which is the one that we have been exploring so far, I can click this drop-down arrow that says Rolling Hills and select the particular site that we want or are interested on looking over. So this is our class. We are looking at class 011321 from this site, and I'm gonna look up another class instance. So I want to drag this other class instance and put it into this other submenu. As well, I'm going to unpin the navigator so you can see and compare both of these classes again by clicking the edit mode. And as you can see, we have the exact same information, class instance information for this particular class, Bridging to Success, and class description and class instance information for 10000 summer ABEASC orientation. You can see the class start and end dates, the instructional programs, and this is just a handy tool if you need to see several screens at the same time. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and close everything, close and move all pages. So this is going to collapse everything back together from this view first. And then I'm going also to do it again, close and move pages. And that will bring us back to our original setting without closing anything. Now, if you're going to close all your tabs on the top, you can do so by clicking the little red X box. But if you don't want to do it one by one, because sometimes you have a lot of windows open, you can do it all at once by clicking on the Pages button and then clicking on Close All Pages. That will take care of closing all your pages and start working with a clean slate. All right. So Tyler Fu is one of our new technology support team members. He is going to explain on how to create a new class and also a new student.
Hey
All right.
everyone. Martha, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, good morning everyone. My name is Ty, as Martha just introduced me. I'm the newest member of CASAS in the tech support team. I'm really happy to be here. I'm really happy you guys are joining us today for this training, and I hope we all learn something new today and to better utilize this TE system. So having said that, we'd like to create a new class. And Martha, you can always chime on in too,
Of course.
because
Sure.
I know that you know, the TE system is it requires a lot of details. So any details that you can provide. Thank
Not
you.
a problem.
Okay, so adding classes, and we would start in the organization tab.
You can take over your mouse if you like.
Oh, thank you.
Sure.
Is that working, Martha?
Does it allow you? No, to?
It does not.
It does not? Okay. That's
Okay.
I'll navigate for you.
Perfect. So a kind of a mnemonic that I used for finding classes and defining them is that classes is the lowest hierarchy of maybe the organization. It goes from organization, agencies to sites, and that's one way I could remember that. So the first thing that we kind of remind ourselves with creating classes is that we have to define that class. So in order to do that, we go to classes and definition. And then this pulls up a lister of all the defined classes within the Rolling Hills agency. So there are, you know, tons and defined classes in this lister right here. 2,746 defined classes. Defining classes is just putting that class into the database. It doesn't give it any activity or any other information. It just defines it and names it. So in order to create a new class, we'd go into the upper left-hand corner button, new. Thank you. And then it brings up this class definition information, which asks for basic information. So class ID, that's one of the basic information that is required. So this can be any unique, arbitrary class ID number, usually, you know, a couple digits. And then to the right of that class ID, extended ID, this is an optional field. Let's say we have a morning class, a night class. We can define it by, you know, morning or night, AM, PM. Also, if we were to split it between the spring semester or fall semester, we can also do that. So it's just an extension from the class ID. and it's giving us more organization on that. Course code. This is, Martha, if you want to chime in on this, you know, this could be like, you know, it's a course code from the school that is using it. Maybe you can
Correct.
elaborate on this a little.
Sure. Yeah, course code is any additional information that you may have available for your class. You usually, if you have a third-party attendance system, usually a course code is always included, especially talking about ASAP. So you can also fill in this information. Course code can be 2 to 4 digit code that will make this class even unique. Yes,
Thank you.
sure.
So that is an optional field. It's not required in defining your class. So moving on to the bottom is your class description. This could be you pretty much giving the name or the description. Pretty self-explanatory there, as it says class description. So the required fields are class ID and class description, associated to the site 4908 Rolling Hills Adult School. The CIP code, and I don't know if we want to touch upon this, Martha. Is this something we want to look into, or?
Well, this is our just further type of codes that you can associate your class into. Like for instance, you have any type of specific related information of this class about any of these items that we have listed in here. This is a 6-digit CIP code, which will associate your class furtherly into or define about your class if it's depending on what type of it is. This is definitely not a required field, like you said. You don't have to fill it in if you don't know what your zip code or CIP code is for the class. So this is not a needed field, as well as the A22 course code or the course code itself. The only required fields are the class ID number, the class description, and very importantly is to select the site. So if we can't leave it to the Rolling Hills database, we have to select a specific site where we are setting up our classes, because the hierarchy, again, the big umbrella is the agency, and then it falls, the sites fall under the class, under the site, and then the sites default under the agency level, and the classes fall under the sites level. So that's how we keep our hierarchy, because if we try to save it at the Rolling Hills Adult School, it won't allow us. It will give us a message. It says, please select a site, not an agency. So, and again, the only two required fields are to select the site, the class ID, and the class description.
Perfect. So I do see Irma's question there. It's a really good question. We don't have to do this if we're using ASAP. And as Laurel is mentioning in the chat box, that's a really good question, Irma. So moving on from there, I think we touched on all the class definition fields, and
So
we're
I'm
just
gonna
gonna hit
it.
save.
Perfect.
And on the left side, we do see a navigator. So as Martha mentioned earlier, the navigator is pretty much like a shortcut. Let's say if you have class definitions up, we can go into class instances and then create that class instance from our navigator. And just hit the new for in class instance. We're gonna click on program year, and 2019, okay. So as mentioned earlier, the class instance is, it gives it a definite time line of the class, and it also gives it its information. So we have that definition from the class as the basic information, and then we we take more information into that for in the class instance information.
Mhm. Right, like adding an instructional program, for instance, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had defined that as an ESL beginning class, so that gives us a very good description and automatically makes us think that this is an ESL class. So we're going to set up an ESL ELL as the instructional program.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I know that we are having a lot of questions on distance learning for special programs, and that could be something that we can provide more information. I think Janice provides more training on that. We did discuss this yesterday, and it started a whole can of worms with that. So I think that
Yeah.
for the sake of keeping this on track, we'd like to stay
Uh-huh.
with just TE basics.
Sure, absolutely. I posted a link on our chat pod for some other OTAN resources as well. So you can look into that link and probably download the presentation that Janice and Jay made about the distance learning. And it contains all the links, PDFs, and PowerPoint presentations together, as well as a recording. So we would like to refer you over to those resources from OTAN for you to refer on to distance learning. So we're not going to profound like Ty says, okay, on the distance learning, but just know that those resources are there for you to refer into. You can always call us or send us an email to tech support or our 800 number. Okay.
Perfect.
Mhm.
Is there anything that we need to touch upon on this section, Martha, or I
Not
think we're good on here?
really, not
Okay.
really. It really depends, based on your classes. If you have EL Civics, especially right now that we
Mm-hmm.
have this EL Civics plan filled out or in place. If you have EL Civics, the ESL ELL would be the appropriate instructional program for any EL Civics classes. And then the focus area from the drop-down menu, which we're going to touch on how to enter the funding sources in just a sec. But here is where you need to specify what type of focus does this class have. If it's a citizenship preparation class, then you can click on citizenship preparation. Very important not to enter citizenship as instructional program like this, because this is not a valid program anymore within the funded programs, but all the citizenship classes fall under the ESL ELL. So but just very, very specific about the focus area. And that's the same thing if it's a civic participation class, it should be ESL. And again, if it's a integrated EL civics with IELCE 243, that should also be instructional program ESL. Now, there are some classes that may be IELCE and have integrated education and training together, and that is again in a different webinar. We're getting a little bit deeper here, but this is another program, a special program that you should also mark if everybody has the same setting, integrated education and training. So as you can see, there are several options for you to enable here under the new class instance information. For right now, we're just going to leave it to a very simple citizenship preparation class, ESL beginning, and then ESL. And then because there's nothing else would be really required, um, but you have the option to enter all this information, to add class notes or any of their codes or any type of instructional setting. You are welcome. You're welcome definitely to enter any of this information, the intensity of the class, but you are not required according to TOPSpro Enterprise, the NRS, and reporting. As long as you have a class definition set up correctly with your start and end date and the valid instructional programs, you should be able to report for these classes. Okay?
Thank you, Martha.
Okay, you're welcome.
So it's just really basic information there. So we're gonna save.
Okay.
Excuse me. So you think this is a good time to move on to creating students?
Sure. If you'd like just a little parentheses before, I wanted to mention about entering funding sources because that is how you get these populated in the focus area. Okay, so you just want to quickly go to organization, agencies, as we were there before. Double click on your agency's lister here, and from your navigator on the left, you can click on program years. Once you click on program years, this menu will open up, and I will broaden this column here to show you the different program years. So we're currently using the 1920 or in the 1920 program year. So we will double click on that area on that year, and the funding sources, you're going to see them here on the top area right below the blue section. Click the edit button so you can properly more see the boxes in here, so you can uncheck in or check the ones that are appropriate for your agency. If you have an adult education program, you should be able to check from this 231 section towards the right. And if you have a jail program, you should be able to check the 225. As you can see, once you check the section 225, it automatically unchecks the 231 because you cannot combine jail data into your adult education data. So that is something to keep in mind. And here is where you save your funding sources for the appropriate year, which is 1920, and then you just click on the save button. Okay, so that is how you add the funding sources. So I'll just go ahead and back up here, and now you're ready to go. Thank you.
Okay, so we've created our class instance in this on this screen. So we've saved it. Did you want to touch on attendance, or now do you want to move on to creating class records?
Well, I would like to touch on, would you like to touch on creating student demographics?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So if you were in Oscar's training yesterday, organization has to do with agencies. So records mainly pertains to students' records. So we go to students and then demographics. And similarly to the class definitions, we have all the the students' information, their basic information in this lister right here. So this is pretty much every student that is in the Rolling Hills 4908 agency. And I want to kind of remind the users that this doesn't mean that there is any activity. It's just creating that student's information. And so to create a new student information, we go into the new button on the upper left-hand corner. And then it brings up the student information. And do we have to specify a site? Okay, so under that, we'd create, we associate that site to the student.
Mm-hmm.
Question, Martha, can it be an agency that that can be associated to the student, or does it have to be a site?
That's a very good question. Again, coming back to our original hierarchy, remember that the agency is the bigger umbrella, and then we have the sites organized into different children, if I may say, and then below the children of the sites come the classes, and then students are also along with the classes in that sub window or sub umbrella under the site. So you do have to create it under a different site. Let's just leave it to the agency level so you can see what message you get when trying to save it at the agency level. Okay?
Perfect. So I do see Irma's question. If we are importing from ASAP, we wouldn't have to create new students.
Exactly. Exactly. With
Perfect.
just importing the ones that you currently have in ASAP, that should populate your database in TOPSpro Enterprise, and you wouldn't have to be creating them in TOPSpro if you already have them on ASAP.
Perfect. Thank you for the question, Irma.
Thank you.
So student ID is the basic information that we need. This is just like how when we create classes, we give the student ID a unique ID. It can be arbitrary. It can be from ASAP. This will be what the student uses into e-tests. And
Right.
sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to interject here for just a second. This would gives us the limit of 15 alphanumeric characters. You can type in numbers, you can type in letters, you can type in dashes as well. So you can create your own unique ID number. And again, if you have ASAP or any other attendance system, you can use those IDs to populate this area. Again, you wouldn't have to manually enter them. You would just need to import them on a CSV file, but it takes about 15. So you can create up to that many record or characters.
Thank you, Martha. So that is one basic information that's required in this student information. First name is required. I believe middle name, initial is required. And last name.
So it's only first and last name. Middle name is
Oh,
not
sorry.
a requirement.
Okay.
That's okay. Perfect.
Awesome. So now those are required, and I believe email is required to establish student information.
These would be actually the very minimum fields
The
to
very minimum.
complete, right?
Correct.
There any other information such as gender, social security number, date of birth are recommended, but they're not required in order to just to save the record. Of course, if you are a California funded agency, this will be more than required. You will need to absolutely provide us with all the demographic information about every single student that you have for WIOA Title II funded agencies. And is also highly recommended for CAPE funded agencies only to also provide with demographics. Okay, so providing with a gender and the birth date also makes it a more unique ID record for that student. Okay,
Perfect.
so I'll just quickly enter anything in here, just random. Okay. Okay, so any additional information such as ethnicity, address, consumer information is highly recommended to enter, but it's not strictly required. And I'm going to go ahead and try to save the information now before changing it to any of the sites. Okay, so let me go ahead and click on the save button. And then we get this little notice here that tells us to, again, select the site, not an agency. So we're going to select site number 1 and continue to save it. There we go.
Perfect. So now we have our student information established, and then we can, you mentioned the parent and child relationship is, can that be this information a parent information where it has the basic minimum information, and then we kind of extrapolate that from that?
Yes, the student information record will always be remaining in the system, and the student record can be associated to any possible classes, to other sites. It can be associated with or go to anywhere within TOPSpro Enterprise, to other areas, not just specifically to the North Campus. You can also duplicate this record into a different site if you'd like, because sometimes there are different campuses or different sites where people can go over to take another class at another site, as well as into two different sites, for instance. Or you may have designated one of the sites for testing, the other one for attending classes. So it's up to you. You can always duplicate these records as long as the student has the same unique ID number that we previously established. Then that should aggregate on all their data together when reporting, and you don't have to worry about the different records that are in TE. As long as they have the same student ID, all the data will be aggregated. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Martha.
Mhm.
Did you want to touch upon anything else in terms of student information?
Sure. I can show you, like, for instance, we just created a, like we could say the shell of the student. When I created this particular student with your name tag, but let me just go ahead and close all the pages and show our attendees how to search for the student. Again, go to records, students, demographics, and once we are in the demographics lister, it will present me with a general list of students among all the sites. So there, as you can see, there are several buttons right here on the top, and you may be wondering what these colorings mean. Well, the colorings mean that there is an active filter or an active sorting or an active something among these areas here when it's green. When it's red, it's not probably required to have any of these displayed. But if we click on the filter button, you can see that there's a default filter right here, which is set up by program year into the current program year. What does this mean? This means that this lister, the student demographics lister, has a filter for data or students that have activity in the current program year. Like we just created Tyler's record, and that Tyler's record does not have any activity so far yet into this program year because he has not tested, he hasn't been enrolled to any of the classes, he hasn't done anything of anything so far because we just created that record. So if I happen to filter by using this little filter button that looks like a funnel, I click on this little filter button, it's going to bring me this little drop down arrow and the little field for me to type in. If I click the drop down arrow, I see several options in here. Equals with, starts equals with will only allow me to type those characters, and it must equal that specific information. If it doesn't equal it, it won't filter out anything for me. So what we always recommend, you can either do starts with, ends with, we can do ends with and just type in Thai. As I can remember, that was my record ended with Thai, and we can click OK. Or what I usually recommend our customers is to use contains, because this broadens your search and will give you more possibilities on finding your records. Okay, so I'm just going to type in Thai and click OK. And this is not going to show me anything. Again, back to this little filter button that is embedded there by default. As you can see, once we added another filter, it added another line for contains, and then current program year must be unselected. You can either remove it, or you can, I'm going to remove it for right now, but I'm going to show you another way, which is this default. Click the drop down and say all. When we click on all, it automatically removes that current program year, but it also removed my other filter. So instead of having an X amount of students, it will show me all the students that have ever joined the Rolling Hills Adult School. So if I click on the More button, it's going to give me over 15,000 records. This is a very large amount of records in the database, but as you can see, it doesn't have any filters, and the button turned into red instead of green. You see that difference? And now if I click again on the filter button, I can turn that back on to the default filter. You can use these scroller bars to scroll up and down, and back to the default, it puts back this current program year filter. Okay, so it's either way. You can remove it from here, or you can turn it into all. It's up to you. So right now I'm going to go back to the default. So it puts that back current program year. To show you again, we're searching for Thai, contains Thai, and click OK, and nothing shows up because that student doesn't have any records. But I'm going to remove this and click OK, and now here is our student.
That's a very good point, Martha. Just simply creating a student information doesn't allow that to be in the lister because of the default filter, unless that student has activity in that program year. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Perfect.
Excellent. So from this point, we have about 15 minutes left from this training. We would like to show you on how to, thank you so much, Ty. We would
Martha.
like to show you how to enroll your students in a class. We would like to show individually, which I'm going to do right now. Once you go into records, students, demographics, and filter for your student in that lister, once you double click on it, you open up the student information, and again, you have this navigator on your left-hand side. If you click on class enrollment, it's gonna allow me to create a new enrollment record. And which site do you think it's gonna allow me to enroll the students on classes from which site? Anybody? Any questions so far? Of course, the North Campus, where we originally set up our students. Thank you so much for that response. Perfect. So now, once I click on the class enrollments, because we haven't enrolled the student to any classes so far, we can click on the new button. That's why nothing appears on the bottom. So once we click on the new button, this opens up on a new tab, and it allows us to view the classes from the North Campus specifically. So as you can see, it already auto-populates some of the data for the student, like the student ID number, the current program year, and of course the site. Now, if we're going to search for the class instance, once we click on the drop-down menu, it shows us the total, all the classes that are available for that class. But if there is any specific, sometimes it's a very long list or a long menu. Sometimes it doesn't appear all of the classes that I want. I can actually type in here to search for my 4908 ESL beginning class, which we created a little bit earlier. So we can click on this little type to search box, or we can also select from lister. We can do either or. And again, using your filter buttons, we're going to type in 4908 and enter, and this is our ESL beginning class. So we can either double click on it or click on this pick button to select that class. All right, so once we selected the class instance that we are going to enroll our student in, we should select the status in class. The status in class is either active, which I'm just right now setting up or enrolling the student in the class since the beginning of the class, which was July 1st. Of course, you can set up whatever date the student enrolled in the class if you have an open enrollment classes. And then date exited class is not necessary because we don't really know when the student is gonna end the class, or we don't really want to set up any exit dates so far. All right, so once we have set up the class enrollment, we can click on the Save button. And that way, it will show that the student is now enrolled in the ESL beginning class 4908 North Campus. As you can see, the navigator, again, it changes on the left-hand side, where we can enter attendance hours for your student. Okay, so you can click on the attendance from the left-hand side and start entering hours of attendance. This little add button will allow us to enter any type of attendance that we may have here available for the student for daily attendance, student observation, student test, student update, and student accumulated. Once you select a specific category of attendance, it is very important to stick on to that to stick onto the same category unless you have a combination again of daily attendance, I'm sorry, student observation, which is the distance learning category. Make sure to enter distance learning category if we click on the or choose the student observation for distance learning. In this case, I'm just going to I'm going to opt for the student update records, and I'm going to enter 10 hours of instruction as of April 16th. And then I will just click on the save button to save that record. Any questions so far? Okay, I'm looking at the chat pod, and it looks like Ruben has a question about remote testing platform. That is a different subject, but Laurel has completed it here. It says that we're currently working on to process, and we're doing a lot of troubleshooting with the remote testing. And now another question from Maria, where do we enter the attendance for distance learning? Again, student observation would be the category that you can use. I am going to show you a different way of adding the distance learning pertaining to a specific class. So if you want to enter it for the whole amount of students that you have enrolled in your class, we can go to organization, classes, instances. And let's say you have this high school diploma class that you are continuing to do from home as of March or April. We are going to double click on this class and look up at the class enrollments first from this navigator on the left. Perfect. We do have a good amount of students enrolled. So I'm going to click on class records. Class records. This is going to show me how, this is going to allow me to, oh, I'm sorry, attendance. Attendance is the one that I want to select for adding attendance. So if we click this little drop down arrow and I click on student observation, this is going to change the template here, and it will allow me to enter student observation hours. If I click add button, these are where the distance learning hours should be recorded. So I can use these scroller bars to navigate down to the entire list. And I can also use this sorting button. If I wanted to be sorted by name, I can also be sorting it by ID number. It's up to you. So you can sort by ID or sort by name. This probably sort by first name instead of sorting it by last name. Okay, so once you have once you have entered the amount of hours for each of the students in your high school diploma class, you can definitely click on the save button and save all those records. Okay. All right, so let's see. Once you have recorded that distance learning under student observation, remember folks, student observation, save all your records for that particular day. I'm going to go ahead and close this last window now. And also wanted to show you a quick trick here, which I always love. It's I'm going to close all my pages right now and go onto the organization page and click on classes and then instances. So let's say I wanted to see attendance for my classes, but I don't really want to double click onto each individual class. What I have here under the More button, I have more tools like this child lister. This child lister is wonderful because it creates this little menu on your left-hand side where you can actually click on class enrollments or anything that you would like to see from any of the top classes here. So as you can see, it cuts off your screen in half again, and it does that double window again. So if we click on the class enrollments, it should display at the bottom. It looks like this class doesn't have anybody enrolled so far, so I'm gonna choose a different random class. And we do have enrollments here, okay? And if you use this little scrolling bar towards the right, you can see the entire amount of listers here or columns displayed, and also under the more button you should be able to see the counter. So it looks like we have 33 enrollees or 33 students enrolled in this ESL 31202 class and so forth. You can also look up the class records, which are their hours of instruction. If we use the scroller bar, we should be able to navigate and see the total amount of hours or what type of attendance they have, what category, and as well as tests. So this is very neat, the child lister, and you can always unpin it as well. And that way you have a double section without having to double click on each of the classes and then exiting out of the class. And this is really, really neat if you like to use it. All right, folks, we are close to finishing our training for today, but I would also like to touch on reports. This reports menu contains many categories of reporting for your data. The most common ones are for e-tests online. You can use the next assigned test report, which I'm just going to quickly go through. If I want to, these are the general settings of your report. It has a session name, session comments you can do, and you can write anything that would you like to see here. I don't know, Martha's training session, for instance. And then this has generic default settings to display class based on test, or all these settings are generally set by default. If you would like to do any date ranges, you can also do the ones in the settings in here or populate your own from what date range to what date range you want to, from assessments you would like to complete or generate for, or and if you have any, want to do any active students only in classes, then you can furtherly refine the resources here. But if you like to do it for one particular student, for instance, you can always go to in-program years from your navigator on the left. And once you click on this navigator on the left, this lister will populate with students that have tested in the current program year. Okay, so you can either unselect here to generally unselect everybody and just single select individual students, or pick and choose the ones that you like to look for. You can always click on this little arrow that points up or down. As you can see, this arrow button looks a little bit different than these, and the ones that have color in here, like a red color or orange, it looks like it's the sorting displayed for this lister. So this lister is sorted by student ID number. As you can see, it increases among if I keep scrolling down. But if I want to sort it by name, I can always click on the name sorting buttons. And this way it's right now going through all the items right now. So it takes a little moment to populate and refresh. But if I click more and then say refresh, it should display a list of alphabetized students. And that way it might be easier for us to pick and choose from that way. And let me just make this reduce a little bit. And also you can sort it by last name or populate a last name column by right clicking on any of these areas right here. If I right click and I say show last name, and then I sort it by last name that way, and I click on more and refresh, this is going to sort by last names, and probably it's going to be even easier if you would look up the last names of each of the students. And that way I can just pick and choose a few of my students that I want to see their next assigned test report and then click the generate button. Any questions so far? Oh, and I appreciate all of you coming in. I see that some of you have to leave for other trainings, and totally acceptable. I really appreciate your time spent on this training. I hope this was helpful. And right now, our next assigned test report is populating for the specific students that I asked for. As you can see, it gives me their last test information, and then it also reports me on what they should be tested next if they were to take another test. And you can see these little navigator arrows towards the upper area, and you can see other pages of this report. Any questions? Okay, so another report that is upcoming data submission time for data reporting in WIOA agencies. You're going to find the NRS Data Integrity Report, which is under Reports, Data Management, NRS Data Integrity. This report is the simplest one and easiest to generate because you got to do is just hit the generate button. Nothing else you have to change under the general settings. I'm going to go back to the general settings really quick while that populates. So really, please don't uncheck any of the boxes here and their special programs, or don't run it specifically for the current quarter, please, because you have to include the data since day one of the program year, since July 1st. So I really appreciate that you don't do any changes on the settings. So once you have generated this report, it is very self-explanatory. Just go ahead and click the export button and export that into one of your areas in your computer. And then once you have saved it, you can go ahead and click on add it as an attachment to our email. Okay, so this is in regards to reports. You can use a Rolling Hills database for practicing anything. Actually, there's nothing you can break. So I would urge you to try to break something in the Rolling Hills database, because it is our training website and our training resource for you that we recommend to you. So there's multiple reports, as well as in the tools menu. We didn't have a chance to go very deep into the tools menu, but there's many wizards for you to use as well. And of course, the help menu will always include release notes, contents, and user license agreement. So yeah, in regards to our training for today, I would say that is some part of the basics. If you have, please, any questions, you can enter them today into the chat pod, or you can always send them over to tech support at casas.org, or you can call us at 1-800-255-1036, option 2 for tech support. And we have some resources here on our website under the contact us. You can find our phone numbers. Okay, folks. Well, thank you so much. Again, I appreciate your time listening to us. And if you have anything else to add, Ty or Laurel?
No, thank you, Martha. Thank you, everyone. We hope you all learned something today, and we hope you guys have a great day. Stay safe, stay healthy. Have a good day.
Yes, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Goodbye. Have a good one. Stay safe.
Thanks, Martha.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for coming.